So, Mark, give us the elevator pitch. You're a game designer. You know what the elevator pitch is. Who is Mark McGee, and what is how to steam broccoli, other than a way to cook broccoli? But I mean, there's some significance behind that name.
Yeah, I mean, I view myself as a regular guy who likes to design games. I really believe that games can do interesting and cool things. And so How to Steam Broccoli is the game publishing company that I started just a couple years ago, and we just released our first game earlier this year, Tether.
I've got it here. So these are pictures that I took actually in the gumbo pot. Whenever you were kind enough to send us a copy of Tether, my wife and I played it. Me and Jared played it. We really enjoyed this game. So what's the inspiration behind Tether? Where did this come from, this idea?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This couldn't have happened without the Game Designers of North Carolina Guild. I have a buddy, Daniel Solis, who we actually designed a game together years ago that's published with Button Shy. It's called Kintsugi. He had come up with this idea of the mirror deck, which is a major part. I mean, that's why Tether works. The thing about the mirror deck is that in the corner, it's got a 2-digit number, like 23. You rotate the card 180 degrees, and on the other corner, the digits are inversed. So on the other side of 23 is a 32. And that was a cool idea. And I saw it, and I was like, there's an interesting game in there. And so using that idea of the mirror deck, yeah, you can see in that picture the 38 and the 83 are just on opposite sides of the same card.
Yep.
Using that idea of the mirror deck, I just was trying to find, like, what game am I thinking of that's inside this deck of cards? And, it got me thinking along the lines of, like, perspective, because it's like you put the card in the middle, I see something different than you see, even though we're looking at the same card. So I knew it had to be like something where you sit across from the other player, and it gradually just pieces started coming together, like connecting cards with numbers. Anytime you have a cards with numbers game, especially if the numbers are big numbers like 57, you're not going to do a lot of complicated math with numbers like 57. So I had to come up with, how do these cards interact that's not mathematical? I was like, well, just counting up, 57, 58, that's about the easiest thing you can do with some big numbers. So yeah, like connecting these astronauts together just in numerical order based on the direction that you see them oriented is kind of where it landed. And from there is just like, find the pieces that make this into a game.
Steve, I'm talking to the designer, and here I am showing pictures from the gameplay. I didn't check to make sure that because I get usually about 88% of the rules right. It looks so far like we actually followed the rules with so far, right?
Yeah.
You know what's ingenious, Steve, about this? If you look at it, and I don't think you've mentioned this yet, Mark, but you not only have the numbers that help you by going from smallest to largest, but the graphic design helps you. It's different colors of numbers. If you notice, like the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and the 70s all get from a hue of colors that go all the way up to 90, which doesn't have dark background. Yeah, you see how that is? And the 11s really stand out because of those bright oranges, Where did that come from, Mark?
There's one big gradient that goes all the way from number 1 all the way to 98, and it gradually changes. So each number has a slightly different color background. Yeah, the reason that we were trying to solve a problem in that there's admittedly a lot of information that you're trying to parse. And we wanted the game to be not just like, can you parse the information, but like, can you also make good plays? So we were like, let's find ways to make just reading the table as easy as possible, knowing that that's still going to be a challenge.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for checking in. Patrick, by the way, is over down on the Space Coast in Texas, and he loves astronaut stuff. This is one you should check out, Patrick. You're going to love this artwork.
Yeah. But yeah, because just looking at a grid full of numbers your eyes can start glazing over, and then you can't even see straight. So yeah, trying to make
you want there to be a flow when you're playing these cards where you're not thinking about numbers. You're thinking more in terms of pattern recognition, right?
Yeah. And so these shortcuts, the colors made it easier. It's like, I have this is green. So anything that's close to green is going to be close to what this number is. Anything that's close to blue, like if I get a blue 86, well, the colors that are most similar to this blue are going to be the 85 and the 87. So yeah, it just helps you to read the table easier and find your matches faster, because we didn't want the puzzle to be, can you find a match? It's, can you choose which matches you want to make right now, to be more of the puzzle.
And I'll tell you, Steve, another thing that I love about this game is, and Mark, I'd love for you to talk to us about it. The artwork behind the game, is that Eric Hibbler? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Eric Hibbler.
Because we'd say Hibble down here, so I want to make sure I get it right. So, but look at the whimsical art, Steve. I mean, I don't know how many different ones of these astronauts there are, but they all just have. If you look at the art closely, they tell a story. And Mark, I heard an interview that you did with your wife. Is it Janelle? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
With the Family Gamers, where she talked about how some of these are her favorites. Some of these have she already has like stories in the back of her mind.
Yeah. Every single card has a different illustration on it. Some of them are like the same characters, like this scientist that's right here. There are different scientists that have the same pose, but other than the same pose, they're different. So they might have like different jackets on. They might be doing different. Yeah, there you go. That's the same. Same person, but completely different person at the same time.
I could stare at all this, and there's a ton of cards, Steve, so we can't go through every one of them.
Yeah,
but this is so much fun. Oh, by the way, Patrick, with it at BGG Con, we could play Tether because, Mark, this is not just a 2-player game, right?
Right. Yeah. It also plays 2 teams. Yeah. So you can play 4 players too. Yeah. There's a little bit of like a limited communication with your team, but if you can set up your teammate, you can like make combos to play more cards at a time, and you're really trying to play off whatever your teammate plays.
Steve, in a 2-player game, if you and I were playing Tether and you've never played it before, and I was telling you about it, you would assume that I would sit on one side of the table and you'd sit on the other, right?
Yes.
And you can do that with Tether, but I think Mark would tell you that might be easier if you sit to my right instead, right? Or to my left, Mark? Is that how you recommend it when you're teaching the game?
I mean, for the 2 versus 2, the team games.
No, I'm talking about just the solo. If you're playing 1-on-1.
No, I would still say sit across, mostly because when you place that card down, you need to be looking at it from different sides, so you can see the different numbers.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is how we did. We sat across from each other. But I kept thinking to myself, wouldn't it be easier if you're sitting that way? Because one person is going to score for the longest chain they have. Imagine like creating when it's time for scoring. And if I remember right, it's like when you have a blob of 6 and a blob of 9.
10 and 14.
And 14. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you get that blob, we stop, we score that blob, or I think what you guys call a tether or a link or something like that, right?
Yeah, we just call them a group, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, we call it a blob. So when you get that blob going, you imagine you make this big rectangular box, and the horizontal player is going to score for the number that it goes in horizontal, not the actual numbers on the cards, the length of the cards that are there. And the vertical player will go the vertical length. So you can see in this one, Jared kicked my butt because he's got a really long. Well, actually, this is not mine. This is not my picture, but he had one similar to that where I just couldn't stop this train kept going, Mark, where he's got cards coming out of his hand, but they also have these cards on the side. You can, if you want to kind of refresh your hand. Mark, tell us about that mechanic where you can refresh your hand by moving cards over to the, I forgot what it's called.
Yeah, so there's a drift astronauts. So the only astronauts that are on the table that are not connected to a group, and they're just kind of floating out there as singles. And if you either can't find a match from your hand, or if you just don't want to play a match, you can take one of your cards, set it adrift, and then you get to draw another card from the deck to replace it. And you always draw a card at the end of your turn. So setting a card adrift is the only way to replenish your hand if you've had a big turn where you play a lot of stuff. But the catch to that is any astronauts that are sitting adrift, either player on their turn can use them if they match one of the cards that they have. So putting one out there. Maybe I'll get to draw 2 cards. I'll have a bigger hand, but I might be giving you exactly what you need to make your big group and make a big play.
There's so much to like about this game. Mark, you've got beautiful art. You've got the snappy gameplay. You've got this crunchy decision about when to give up cards and when to play them. And all of this, Steve, takes place in about 15 minutes. Once we knew the game, we were playing games in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as you were talking about it. I understand why you want to have the players opposite each other, because that's the whole point of the mirror deck. I'm looking down my channel, you're looking down yours, but my scoring versus your scoring is going to be different from side to side versus up and down.
Right.
The thing that BJ was telling me about with this that made it so interesting to me also is the idea that when you're creating, and BJ's using the very scientific space vocabulary of blobs, right? As you create a blob, right, you can then merge those blobs together, and then you're sliding them together and creating one more joined together group of things. So there's a lot of paying attention to where they could fit together and interlock and then tether back up again. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, there's an interesting flow to the game in that at the beginning, you either like maybe both players are playing into one group and it kind of gradually gets bigger, or maybe a bunch of small groups are on the table. But after a little while, yeah, the groups that already exist, they're going to start sliding together, and as the game progresses, yeah, groups that are already out there are going to start joining together, and you're going to get bigger and bigger groups. And that the whole like scoring size at 6, 10, and 14, that came with a lot of like testing to figure out like where does the game naturally feel like, oh yeah, I finally made the big one, you know.
Right.
Yeah, because just joining the groups together is really satisfying too. Like these cards that have been sitting over here for a while, you know, they're doing fine, but once you can incorporate them to the massive blob, like it just feels so satisfying to do it, to pull it all together.
If people want to get a copy of the game, is it still available?
Yeah, so we're partnered with All Play.
Oh, great.
All Play has several partners that they do shipping and warehousing and stuff for. So we are on the All Play partner store. So if you just go to allplay.com and look at board games, there's just a thing that you can look at their partner stores, and How to Steam Broccoli's on there.
All right, that is How to Steam Broccoli's Tether, designed right here by Mark McGee. Mark, it's a solo design, if I remember right.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, seriously. And it's available on the website. Just go to that All Play website, look for their store, and they've got a bunch of the different partner companies that you can pick it out, and that's one of them.
Yeah. And if you go to howtosteambroccoli.com, we have a link straight to it also. So